Well, we've just had the Paris-Roubaix 2022, and it was interesting what sort of tyre choices that they selected with this trend towards wider and wider tyres. And we're seeing on gravel bikes, which are primarily road bikes, the tyres getting well over 30 mil, 32. Even some of these new gravel bikes coming out now, you can fit 40 mil tyres on. So the marketing's telling us that on these rough surfaces, these tyres offer more comfort and they offer more performance on rough surfaces. But the pro peloton and the manufacturers making the bikes for that event, that Paris-Roubaix event, are not really putting those type of tyres on their bikes. Typically, they're using 28 mil or 30 mil, which is only really one step up from their normal 25 mil, maybe second step up. But they're not really going over 30, and they're still typically running tubulars. So why is this? Well, the Paris-Roubaix consists of 29 cobble sections, which is a total of 54.8 kilometres of the total 257.2 kilometres. And this gives us a percentage of the cobbles to normal road, which is around about 21%. So with that margin, we would say that, okay, then if we're going slower on the Pave and we ride wider tyres or tyres that are more accustomed to those really rough surfaces, which I don't know if you've seen pictures of the Pave up close. It's incredibly poor condition and it's very, very rough, while a lot of them ride in the gutter. But what we need to look at is if that 21% of going for a more adaptable bike to that rough surface is going to hinder them on the normal roads, so it's going to be swings and roundabouts, and they're probably not going to be ahead. So the bikes could probably be kept predominantly more road focused, and they're just running slightly bigger tyres. Well, when you go to these significantly wider tyres, you're actually adding quite a lot more weight because those tyres get quite heavy, and especially if you're running tubeless, you're adding sealant as well, and you may be running a significant amount. It might not be just, your 30 mil or 60 mil you run in the smaller tyres, and that would probably give you some benefit when you're on the Pave, but you could also run wider tubulars as well. But what happens is when you go to those wider tyres, you're getting more weight and you're also compromising your aerodynamics because the rim tyre combination is specifically has to be set up to get the 105% rule to keep your aerodynamics as efficient as possible. So yes, you could go to these wider tyres and you could increase your speed over the Pave and give yourself more comfort and more compliance because you've got a much bigger tyre on. But then that would compromise your weight of your wheels and also compromise your aerodynamics. So why still run tubulars over tubeless and these hookless rims they're putting out, which the manufacturers are telling us these can be run at lower pressures and they give you sealant. You've got like a tyre that has a certain amount of self-healing because it has the sealant in it. And why not run these? Why are these teams still sticking with tubulars? And the reason why is, apart from the convenience of being able to put a tube in or just carry a tube in your back pocket, as far as us normal riders go, tubulars in all areas are superior. Now, I know that I don't like to talk about this because I want to sell new products, I don't want to sell tubulars. And the reason why is because tubular tyres can be run at a much more wider pressure variant. You can run tubulars lower than you can run tubeless or hookless rims, and you can run them much higher than tubeless or hookless rims. And even, which we don't know, you can actually run sealant in tubulars as well. And it's actually very effective at pressures under 60 psi. And I know that because I've run sealant in tubulars for years, and at the higher pressure, if you want to run them at 80 or 100 psi, they kind of can give a problem. But once you get to 60 psi or lower, they tend to hold that pressure really well. So you could be run sealant in your tubulars, and that could work. And we don't really know what the teams are doing because a lot of these sorts of things that they do could be a little bit, hush hush, and they don't want to share that with other teams or they don't want to share that with the public. So really, what can we make of all this? Now, I know the manufacturers and all of these high-end YouTube magazine channels are telling us, yeah, you've got to run lower pressures and you're going to run wider tyres and this is faster and it's going to give you more comfort. Now, definitely it's going to give you more comfort because the air in that tyre, the more air you have in the tyre, acts as basically like a shock absorber. And the bigger the tyre, the more air you have in there, and that whole air container acts as a shock absorber, absorbing that energy when you hit rough surfaces. So absolutely. But as far as faster goes, well, the people in the pro peloton obviously are not convinced on that avenue of what the manufacturers are trying to sell. And in my view, if you've watched my channel for some time, I think it's more about selling product because they can't get their tubeless tyres and their hookless tyres to work really above 60 or 70 psi. So they're pushing people to go to these lower pressure tyres. They're making the frames to accommodate them. They're making the rims to accommodate them. And of course, we know hookless can't go over 72 psi. So this is the direction the marketing or manufacturers want to go. And this is what they're pushing in the marketing. But when we actually look at the pro peloton, and they're riding on surfaces that are incredibly rough and difficult to control your bike over. And we've even seen the bikes almost bucking the riders off their bikes because the Pave is so rough. And we do know that the Pave does give you a higher rate of punctures, but yet they're not going to that tubeless or hookless technology. So in conclusion, if we're talking about going to wider tyres now, if you're riding on rougher surfaces and you want comfort, yeah, absolutely. They will give you more comfort. But as far as ultimately faster, and we're putting these on road racing bikes and they're making the frames wider and they're making the forks wider, this really is not faster. It's not more aerodynamic. It's making the forks wider. It's making the bike wider. We're carrying more weight on the bike because once you go to those bigger tyres, the weight goes up considerably. And you really cannot, I mean, the figures just show you they cannot be faster. Up to a point wider tyre from what we used to run years ago when we used to have 19 mil and now we're up to 25. Yeah, potentially they could, and they've made the rims wider to accommodate the 25 mil so they can maintain the aerodynamics. But once you start to go to these really, really wide tyres, then the forks have to be wider, the bike, and then you have problems with the chain stays because you need to have difficulties fitting that tyre in, and that changes the way that you need to design the chain stays, and it does cause problems for the designers of the bikes. Well, anyway, guys, leave your comments down below. Are you a wide tyre advocate, or you still think, hey, look, you know, the skinny tyres, like I ride 23 mil. I actually went to 25 mil. I didn't like the feel of them, went back to 23 mil, but I run tubulars, so that's probably a different kettle of fish. But I think this wider tyre and having to adapt the frames and adapt the rims and everything like that, I just can't see it. If you look at it through a scientific lens, you just can't see how this is quicker. And really, I think the pro teams know this, and this is why there's a reluctance for them to make the frames and also the tyres go significantly wider for events like the Paris-Roubaix. Well, anyway, guys, if you haven't, remember to subscribe down below because I'd really appreciate that. And also remember to smash that like button because that really helps the algorithm, the YouTube, how it works, push that video out into the YouTube world so more people can see this content and not get sucked up by the marketing. And guess what? I'll see you next vid. Cheers for watching.